Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every week, Tim and I get together and we talk about a different movie from the horror genre, from your well-known classic down to that rare gem doing donuts in a Trans Am at the back of your video store shelf. This week, Tim and I are going to talk about the family comedy Mom and Dad from 2017. Tim, have you had that midlife crisis yet?
Well, I mean, where do we start? The muscle car, the jumping headlong into combat arts,
Yeah, you seem to have one every 5 years.
Yeah, I do. I like to think of it as an enthusiasm for life in general, but the timing of it is conspicuous. I think that that is something that I will struggle with, but I'm not even afraid of struggling with a midlife crisis because it means that I don't want to give up.
Right.
Like I think if you don't have a midlife crisis, it's like, well, what are you even doing then? You know, like you're just dead inside then. Right. And I want to be 18 forever. And I feel like I'm 18 forever. My joints don't always agree with that, but on the inside, I have a real serious and genuine lust for life. And so, yeah, if it comes across as a midlife crisis, call it whatever you like. I'm just trying to have as much fun as I can, you know?
Yeah. Do you feel having kids helped it or I mean,
yeah, helped it more than I thought it would.
I think having a kid is going to at least help promote a midlife crisis.
Oh, help promote it.
If you don't have the kid, there is no crisis really.
Right. But you know what though? It's kind of like when an artist says that sometimes their best work comes out of having challenges, and that forces you to come up with something, whatever that great idea is. And if the challenge wasn't there, then maybe the inspiration wouldn't be there.
Sure.
So I think you might be able to say the same thing about not having kids. Like, yeah, you might have some more free time, you might have some more money, and maybe you do make great use of that, and that's fantastic. But I think that for a lot of people, having and there's so many wonderful things that come along with it too, but having the challenges of being a parent does kind of force you to take a closer look at your life and make sure that you're still trying to take care of yourself a little bit here and there while trying to, raise somebody and keep them from dying.
Very important part.
Right. But I will say though, the one thing that I was not expecting at least as a young parent was I didn't realize how cool it was going to be to have teenagers so that I can keep up with new words, new trends, new slang, movies, new music. Like one of my daughters is basically my sole source for new music now. And it used to be completely the opposite. But yeah, she listens to all kinds of crazy stuff like Russian dark wave and all kinds of crazy
Your
things.
Kid?
Yeah, believe it or not.
What?
So yeah,
I found the easiest way to become the favored parent is just a remedial knowledge of your basic memes and terms, and you seem pretty cool then.
Oh yeah, it's true. It's true. But you know what's funny though, is that you can never fully escape it. Like just when you think you know so many of those memes or so many of those terms, but there's always going to be that, oh geez, Dad, or just like the head shake, like, no, whatever you just said.
I'm still dabbing and I get that a lot. I mean, as like internet cultured as my child is, a dab will still get an eye roll. And I'll tell you, they're fun to do. I love to dab.
I was even telling the girls, God, it was just this week that they should bring back dabbing, like the way that like popular culture recycles so fast these days. I'm like, what would happen if you went into high school on Monday and dabbed, and they'd be like, and they just had this look of terror on their face, like they would never dream of it, even though 2 years ago they couldn't stop doing it.
Right.
But yeah, so I love torturing them with that. Like, start dabbing again. See
Well,
what happens.
I'm never giving it up, Tim. Maybe that's my midlife crisis. I will say the internet culture is like, this is what I've been waiting for. And I think that's why it's easier for me to at least connect with. I feel like I connect well with younger kids because it's like, oh, we now live in a culture where we just communicate through like movie quotes and like clips from things. That's all I've done my entire life. So
Yeah, all you
I
have
finally know how to talk to people.
all you have to do is just keep up the pace. That's the key. You just have to keep up with it. Like,
Yeah, and it's exhausting. And I know there's going to be a day where I'm either not going to be able to, or more likely, just stop caring.
right. Yeah.
Just
I
gonna
think
be like,
that's
this is not worth it anymore.
right.
Still gonna dab though.
That comes along with like getting brittle boned. Your body your body says, no, that's it. We're done.
Well, let's hope that never happens. Tim, let's also hope what never happens is us wanting to kill our children. Could you even imagine?
Yikes. I don't know. They're pretty scrappy. It'd be tough.
But
But
we've all had our moments. But in this movie, mom and dad, that's precisely what happens. The parents try to kill the kids. I mean, if you want the basest Nan sum, there it is. The parents try to kill the kids.
yeah. And that's go ahead.
I was just gonna go through the standards. This was written and directed by Brian Taylor. It stars Nicolas Cage because this is January horror through the cages. Selma Blair and Lance Henriksen is in an awesome cameo. Budget $4 million. Box office $169,000.
Such a shame.
Such a shame. And I don't know if it passes the Bechdel-Wallace test. Maybe. I don't know. I assume the daughter and her friend are talking at some point.
Yep. But
they're not talking about the girl's boyfriend.
No, she's like, do you want a drink? And she's like, yeah, bitch. Like, which I love their interplay.
Yeah, those two are fun.
So cruel, and funny at the same time. But yeah, I think
we'll say it does. We'll say.
Yeah, sure it does.
Yeah, they're talking about the baby. She talked to her sister about the baby and stuff. I guess.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Is that a male baby? Because when the one nurse is like, you have to give it back. Like, are they talking about a girl baby?
Oh no, it is a girl. It is a girl.
Okay, perfect.
It is. Yeah,
passes the test.
Yeah, feminist film, mom and dad.
So Tim, this is I didn't write out a Nan sum. That's what I forgot to do. I'll have to do this one off the fly. Should I just do Nan sum and then we can just talk about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just off the top of my head, I can't believe I didn't write this down. Oh, no, I did. Okay. Well, the day may have started normal enough in the Ryan household. Daughter mad at mom. Dad doesn't approve of boyfriend. Son fights with daughter. Things quickly change as a phenomenon begins to sweep through society of parents violently killing their children. Now the two Ryan children must band together to stop their parents from killing them, especially before grandma and grandpa get there for dinner. There you go.
Man.
Should I be giving more away in the sum? I mean, I can't like spell out everything, right?
No,
they're
like
okay, right?
You got to have a little tease to it.
Okay.
Well, first of all, Brian Taylor, a director's name that we can easily pronounce. Like that's
yes,
always
finally.
Yeah. And he was we'll go ahead and say famous for those Crank movies. Did you ever see any of the Crank films?
Love Crank movies.
They are just fun and awesome and ridiculous.
And when I saw this after the fact, so much like I was like, okay. And I was like, because it did remind me of something. And yes, this movie is a crank, a suburban crank.
Yeah. And a perfect director for the Cage Rage, for Nicolas Cage doing what he does best.
Yep.
It's unlike what we just covered a week ago in The Wicker Man. this movie has a tone that fits that Nicolas Cage rage that we all love to see. So it's put to great use here. It's a fantastic performance, and just kind of, speaking a little bit more again to where we're at in our Horror Through the Cages miniseries. The funny thing is that you might be tempted to think that Nicolas Cage started this sort of mega acting style of his in very recent years, in movies like this, or anything that's come out in maybe the last 5 or even 10 years. But the truth is, he's been at this for a long time, even all the way back to like Moonstruck. And
he actually, when he got famous, like got really famous, wasn't doing it as much. But he started his career like even crazier than I'd say he does stuff now.
Yeah,
the choices he made. What's the movie where he plays like the Puerto Rican guy?
Oh.
Hey man, hey, come on, man.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm gonna look that up as soon as we're done.
God, he's just in like brown face and doing this insane accent, but he's Nicolas Caging it. He is committed to it.
Yeah, that's great. No, and even like the thing is we touched on this a little bit in the last episode, but he is so thoughtful. And speaking of, midlife crises, he's a guy that's in a perpetual state of that, because he just, like I've heard him say in interviews before, like he just loves being an active person. He loves being engaged in things. He loves researching things and discovering things and finding ways to use the inspiration that he comes across. Like I mentioned Moonstruck. That one of his famous lines in that movie, because his character lost part of his hand, and instead of like the line is, "I lost my hand," and most actors might sort of use that as like an inward, like feeling sorry for themselves, maybe crying a little bit. But he was inspired, and I wish I knew the name of it, but it's this old German expressionistic film, very, very black, like that kind of black and white where like on the edges of the screen, it almost looks like the light is flickering in and out. Yeah. So there's a scene of an actor kind of holding up one of his hands. Just picture me doing like a bicep flex, but instead of a clenched fist, it's just open. And that's exactly like he's took that arm pose and lifted up the wooden hand and does that "I lost my hand" line, and nobody would deliver it like that. Like it's so unnatural, but it fits and it commands your attention. So that kind of operatic style of acting is absolutely the most perfect ingredient for this film.
Yeah. And this film, there is a ton of movies where you could just be described as Nick Cage go crazy.
Right. And the thing is that with this movie, now I'm going to just, because I can't hold myself back anymore. I've got to say why I love this movie so much. You've heard me say a million times that I hate preachy. I almost slipped up there. I will never say that. I hate preachy films. It doesn't mean that my opinion is better than anybody else's. It's just, for me personally, I don't like it when there's a sort of an underlying political context or something like that. I love characters, and I love story, and I love originality, and that's what I look for in the films that I love. And I started watching this movie, and I got real concerned like 10 minutes in. I'm like, oh man, are they gonna twist this into like a boomer bashing movie? Or on the other side of that coin, are they going to turn it into like a Gen Z bashing movie?
Right.
I didn't know which way they might go with it. And I was worried that it was going to do, I know you really like The Purge. And I don't like The Purge because of, let's put it this way. I love The Purge as a story and the characters until it takes that political turn.
Right.
This movie never does that. It's a straight ahead, fun, original idea, and it never tries to make it more than it is.
It's kind of a zombie movie.
Basically,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it never tries to make a bigger statement. Now,
Yeah.
it might
It's not
be,
a zombie movie about consumerism.
right. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's just trying to,
It's about a kids suck and parents suck.
right. The closest thing is maybe like a sociological context that is the idea of how you feel about your life as the path is in front of you and all of it is unknown, but it seems to have all of the potential and the promise for whatever you want. I mean, that's what parents are always, or adults are always telling you as a kid, right? Like, you could be anything you want to be,
Yeah.
put your mind to it. And when you're growing up and you're a teenager, you really feel that way because they keep hammering that into you. And even if your circumstances aren't the best, you don't know what your future is. So sometimes you might at least fantasize that it's going to be great, or that you'll be famous, or that you'll be rich, or whatever it is you want to be.
Yeah.
And then you become a parent, and depending on what your mindset is, glass half empty or full, you might feel like, hey, what happened to that person that I thought I was going to be? And if anything, it touches on that, but nothing more. There's no more agenda beyond that.
It's this weird sense of failure, even though you're successfully like raising a human being, but it's just the self-deprecating, like I fucked up and didn't do the things I want, which you can always do. Like, that's unless you have a dream that's like you can only happen until you're 21, or like you can. It's just, it's hard, and the older you get, the more realistic the finish line gets.
Right.
And it can be crippling then to be like, because your idea is, well, I have to go back, but you can't go back. You're constantly going forward, and every day is a reminder of that. And yeah, so when you're young, it's a trope everyone knows, and every kid knows, an adult's going to be like, you don't understand until you're older, and you just don't. You
Right.
can be like, I understand probably being old sucks, but you don't understand that feeling of, oh, wow, 20 years went by. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I was watching some movie I was watching. I was like, this thing's 22 years old. How is that even possible? It feels like it came out this decade.
Well, that's the same thing when we just covered The Wicker Man, and it came out in 2006. And that to me sounds like, hey, we're doing a recent movie for our taste and what we
right. And my kid was like, oh, I was born this year. I was like, what the fuck? Oh my God, this movie's old.
Right. It just sneaks up on you. But you're right. Everybody has the power to fix that. I mean, when I was 10 years old, I was obsessed with ninjas and martial arts and fighting. And I actually started taking some classes, but some economic things got in the way, and it wasn't really feasible for our family. But I never let go of that dream. And then here I was, I remember I was 39 years old at the time, and 38 or 39. And I thought to myself, like, I can just do this now. Like, if I want to go out and learn martial arts and train in martial arts, I can just do that. And instead of letting that fear of, I'm nervous to walk through the front door.
Right.
Am I too
the shape
old?
I was? Yeah, I would
Right.
be as good as I would have been had I started this when I was 18 or something.
And the truth is, it's like, well, maybe you won't be, but at least it'll be something,
Yeah. Also, no one gives a shit.
Right. Yeah.
No one is going to be like, hey, dude, you should have started this 20 years ago. Get out.
Right. So, yeah, it is possible. I mean, if people just look at their dreams as something that, and maybe you have to curtail it. Like, okay, the funny thing is, and maybe you and I both went through this, but I certainly thought when I was a teenager that there was absolutely zero chance that I would not become a wildly famous actor. And I am absolutely, honestly, in my heart, 1,000% happy that never happened.
Wow.
Because I'm so thrilled with the life that I have. And I found out that the secret is that it's just about tempering things. Maybe you didn't become a famous actor, but you can still get involved in really meaningful theatrical projects in your town or your city. Like you might have to measure things a little bit and scale them down, but you could still do it.
Sure.
You know? So it's about a mindset. And I didn't mean to turn this into some like self-help episode here, because this movie is way more fun than that. But yeah, getting back to my original point here is that this movie does not get in its own way. It realizes what it is, and it never lets that go. And that is a straight ahead thrill ride with an interesting concept that is beautifully executed from the very beginning. And it's funny, so many crazy things happen in here.
There's so many extra like turns and events that happen that that you don't get the sense of when you hear like what the movie is about.
And you forget about like things like the very first scene. The very first scene lets you know right off the bat, like, we're going for it.
Yeah. You know, it's just a woman. She's driving and looks back at her baby, and then you see her get out of the car, and then you see a wide shot, and she's just left the car on the railroad tracks, and she's walking away.
Yeah. And you're watching this and the movie just opens that way. And you're like, holy shit, like they're going for it, like, which is great. And it's done in a sort of really sort of non-spoon feeding kind of style of direction. It's almost just kind of like you just happen to witness it sort of feel. Yeah. And the other thing that's so great is that the movie continues to not overcomplicate things throughout the entire film, because as we've said, these parents are suddenly overcome with some sort of mystery hysteria that drives them to want to kill their own children, not kill other people's children.
No,
all children, just their own.
Loved that.
Yeah. I love it.
It's not you had to be afraid of parents, just your parents.
Right. And the other great thing is that, and we've talked about this in some movies that have gotten it right and movies that have gotten it wrong, but in this movie, they don't over-explain the origin of why this is happening.
No, it's great. It doesn't need to.
Yeah.
You get a sense of like I guess there's one scene where it's not too subtle how they introduce it. But there's just kind of it's a static.
Right.
But no one ever is like points it out. Yes. There is just one scene where you get a better close up, and then, you know, a monitor turns to static, and then that's when it happens. So unless you're just dumb, but there are parts where I didn't notice the static before. I went back just to like kind of like get some notes on some other scenes, and I was like, is that introduced? And it is. There are, you know, just like monitors in the background or something that you don't even really see. But yeah, it's like there's the Stephen King book, The Cell, which I really liked.
Oh,
did you read the book?
Oh, one of the few books I've read cover to cover.
So good. And it's because there's just this mysterious signal no one knows. And I just kind of love that mass where everyone will turn. And there's like a part in that book that just has stuck with me. And it's right at the beginning, because I think a girl like kills another girl, or she like bites her face or something, and like just like the way he describes how she like turns to the protagonist in the story, and it's just like with just like this bloody face, and he's just like but you could tell she's just like vacant, like that wasn't like she wasn't there, you know.
Yeah.
And you're right. And they do a really good job in this movie of, I mean, it is a little inconsistent as to when the static comes in and why. Whatever, that's not the important part,
right?
Because The Cell becomes more about fighting the signal people and whatever. Like this is like, if that were an overarching movie, this is act one of that movie. This whole movie is.
Well, and it's funny how we've gotten a little bit of a taste, and I don't mean to compare this to any sort of real tragedy, but we've gotten a scary taste of just how accurate the action and the way that the action plays out in this movie can be in real life. Because if you think back to those the panic shopping days of COVID, where nobody was talking on the news like, hey folks, get ready to buy extra toilet paper in the next couple of weeks because people are going to lose their fucking minds and buy like 6 packages at a time. We had no warning of that. It just started happening. And as it's happening, you're like, is this real? I heard somebody said they couldn't find any Clorox wipes and they couldn't find any toilet paper. And then you go to the store and you're like, oh shit, they're right. And it all does just sort of happen to you without
see the person with the cart and you're just like, that's weird.
Right. But you're right. You know, what you were referring to in The Cell, the part that I thought you were going to talk about is when he first sees something happen. I think he's like in the city, maybe he's buying.
Yeah, no, it's right. Yeah, I'm talking about right at the beginning.
He sees a guy attack a dog. Like that's what he sees.
That might be.
He's like a man like bite a dog's throat. And he's
it's
like,
been a long time since I only read it the one time and like right when it came out and retaining a book. I'm amazed I could talk this much. Like that's how much that affected me.
But yeah, the reaction is like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? Like, is this actually happening?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that the movie does very well. And it's the key word here is balance, because somebody might be tempted to say, okay, I've got Selma Blair, I've got Nicolas Cage, I've got these great kid actors, by the way, fantastic performances. And they have the toughest job because the kids in this movie are the straight men. They have to play it straight. It's the adults that get to go wacko and have fun and be silly. But the kids really have to hold it together with their straight performances.
Yeah.
But the thing is, a normal construct of a movie would be focused almost with like blinders on this family. But the movie does such a good job of showing other parents killing their kids. And so the fun just gets to be spread out and you get to see.
Yeah. But just enough, like the world's not too big. You get enough of a sense of what's going on. Cause you've got like the 3 stages of it. You've got the main family, you have a couple of the ancillary characters, and then we do get a nice, like, just kind of like nameless mob of killing.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're so fun to watch. Like, I mean,
it's like so scary. Like picture your dad just like chasing you down with rage and blood in his eyes, man. Like, this is a terrifying thought. I mean, enough to when I probably, like, not to say that never happened. I'm sure my dad's chased me down several times, but I'm also at those moments, I'm like, oh, this is probably something I deserve, you know? But just like, if he picked me up from school like that would be, what do you do?
Yeah, no. And it's just so well done because it doesn't give it too much gloss. I mean, some of the stuff like the feeling of it, the vibe of when these parents are chasing down their kids feels gnarly. Like it feels scary. It feels dangerous. But at the same time, like the director said, he's like, there's a version of this movie that is X-rated. He doesn't mean that he actually filmed it, but he's saying there's a version of how far you could take this concept and go way overboard. But
there's one scene in this movie where I was just like, please don't go this way. Please don't go this way.
And they do, and they do
it so good. It's everything I could have wanted in that scene. It goes just far enough. We'll talk. Yeah. We'll just say what the scene. I think this is a movie we can kind of jump around a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
Because the mom, Selma Blair's character, Kendall, her sister is pregnant and she's going to go at any time. And so she gets kind of a call in the morning that she's in the hospital. So she goes to meet her and you're just like, so, I mean, you already know the concept of what's going on in the movie. So there's already this like, oh, cool, she's going to have a kid, but it's not like, your bratty 15-year-old who's on its phone all the time. It's a fucking newborn baby. So you're already on edge, right? But everything is fine. And like the birth happens and everyone's happy and everyone's crying. That's the first time where it's like something's happening because like the monitor in the back goes to static and you hear the baby change a little bit, and Selma Blair's like, "Oh, you're holding it too tight," and you're just like, "Oh fuck, here it goes." No, but meanwhile, the soundtrack is "It Must Have Been Love." It's playing. So they're trying to pry this baby out of this woman's hands. She grabs a scalpel, is trying to stab the baby. It must have been love. Like, if that song's not playing, that scene doesn't play as well as it does. If she kills the baby, it doesn't play as well as it does. But it was just the right amount of humor, tension, terror, emotion. I loved that. For a scene that was telegraphed that it's coming, I still enjoyed it so much.
No, you're right. And it's funny. I didn't think that was the death that you were going to be referring to. But that's just so great that there are so many deaths that you think like, oh God, am I going to have to see what I think I'm going to see? And the thing is, you don't have to. They've set it up already, or they use some sound effects, or what the murder weapon is. So your mind fills in the rest.
Yeah.
So they do an awesome job of that. And there are movies that, I'm not going to put them down. It's just a different type of movie, but like a Serbian film, like there's a baby scene in a Serbian film that does take it to the level that you did not want this to go. And it's very unsettling, terribly unsettling.
Right.
But this movie does, you're right, just a great job of dancing up to that line and even dancing on that line a little bit, but never takes it to like gut munching level. It never takes it, never makes it gross, even if we, there are some gross things that happen, but we get to imagine them rather than being forced to see them. And I think that's what the director was going for, is that everybody was so worried. Like it's so funny. Everybody in the movie industry was worried about this movie because of its premise. But yet when the director would tell just regular unwashed masses, folks like you and me about it, they were like, fuck yeah, that sounds great. Like, I would love to see
When I saw the trailer for this, I'm like, what a fucking concept. How's no one done this yet? That's awesome.
Right. And so, they were the ones that were worried. And I read an interview where someone asked the director, like, were you worried about, how people might take this? And he just said, he made a great point. He said, there are so many venues for people to find their entertainment now, between streaming services and, whatever the million different ways, YouTube, you name it, just any different way that somebody can find something to watch to entertain them, that you almost have to push it a little bit. I think what his reaction was like, do you really think it's that bad? He's like, because I know, he's like, I know where you're coming from, but is it really that bad compared to some other stuff out there?
It's not trying to shock you. Like,
no,
here's a mutilated kid.
Right. Yes.
Like,
that's
they never do that. Plenty of kids die in this movie.
Oh yes.
In some horrible ways, but yeah, they're implied just enough. Yeah. It's not like there's more to offer in this movie than the pure shock of a dead child. Sure, there's probably a version of this movie
that you could make.
Yeah, that's a Serbian film where you're just like, I saw it once and it's just a gross thing to tell people about,
Right. Right. And it does everything just right, and it feels really accurate. I'm very happy to say that I don't have a teenager that acts like Carly, the teenage daughter in this movie, thankfully.
Right.
But when I'm seeing the exchanges between her and Selma Blair, the Kendall character, a lot of that stuff is ringing really true. And I know I keep going back to Wicker Man, but that's how a good movie is made. It's not just on this one or two or three scenes that you're hoping for. It's that everything in the middle hits all the right notes as well.
Yeah.
So that was really awesome to see. And like I said, these kids do a fantastic job of how scared they are. But it never gets to a point where it's not fun. And I think it's what you were describing in that that hospital scene, it's the juxtaposition, which I know I use that word a lot, but I love it when you have two very opposite moods or very opposite feelings and you ram the two together and it just makes it that much cooler. And this movie does a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, like that scene made me like scrunch up on the couch, like kind of ball up and be like, no. I meant to ask you this. What about that title sequence? I don't think it fit the tone, but I loved it. It was this crazy, like 70s with the weird like a TV movie ballad kind of going on. And you get those like hard color silhouette stills, like just like a red, and it's really cool. I was expecting more of a Crank title sequence, because this movie is very kinetic. Did we mention that before? We were talking about that off air.
No, you're right. Yeah, but I know what you mean. It is I would describe it as almost having a little bit of a Grindhouse feel, like a Grindhouse opening.
Yes.
And
with like the, and it had the like the studio and the Roman numeral year through the whole thing at the bottom.
And I think that, it was an interesting choice. And, as we've done these episodes and done our research, I'm pretty shocked at the amount of times that I've found out that a title sequence is done by somebody completely different than the director. That it might be just another person that comes in to film the title sequence, which is, if I was a director, I would want to have some control over that. But you
might get to a point though where you're like, I don't give a fuck.
Right. Yeah. I'm just here to make the movie.
Right.
But yeah, so does it seem a little, I had the exact same reaction you did. It does feel a little out of place, but it's so cool that you just don't care.
Yeah, it's so well done.
Yeah. It's kind of like it matches the movie in that both of them are cool. And like they don't, that's all you need.
Yeah.
One thing that speaking of cool, God dang, I wish I would have written the term down. It's called planned
obsolescence.
Yes. And I thought that was a really neat concept. If anything, like I said, this is as close as the movie gets to any sort of other level like preachy quality, but it's not preachy. It's just more of a kind of a metaphor. And so what it's saying is you have this teacher who is played by, I made sure I wrote his name down, Joseph Reitman. And I'm like, God, where do I know this guy from? I know this guy. And
it's been around a long time.
Well, he was. And the reason why I know him is that because I remember there was Shannon Elizabeth from American Pie, smoking hot.
Yep.
And then she got married. And I'm like, oh, who'd she marry? And I saw a picture of her. And I'm like, that guy?
Yeah.
That fucking guy?
Those two are like, do you know who Christina Hendricks is? She's like the redhead from Mad Men.
Yeah.
Hourglass figure. Do you know who her husband is? Have you seen Super Troopers?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Do you at least know the scene? It's the beginning scene where like the kid, like they're getting pulled over by the cops and he eats all the drugs and freaks out. Okay. You don't know it, but look him up.
Okay.
That dude it's the same thing where you're going to go, what?
Yeah. Well, this
guy and Shannon Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Okay.
It never made sense. I don't think they're still together.
No, they're not. Like in 2012 or something, they split up.
But the funny thing is, you started seeing once he married her.
Like I barely know. I don't know. Like October 2012, I think it was the 15th.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Exactly. Yeah. Somewhere exactly around there. So this guy, it was funny. He married her, and then all of a sudden he started getting other roles and stuff because that's
he was also the boyfriend. He was like Kelly's kind of reoccurring boyfriend on Married with Children.
Yeah. Yes, that's
way
right.
back.
And
but he's always getting hot women.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it, but either way, I really do sort of like him. He has kind of a limited role in this movie, but I would say that it's an important role in the beginning because we're not getting a lot of the family dynamic. The kids are in school, so there has to be a teacher, and he doesn't try to overshoot his role. He just nails it kind of perfectly.
I think he's really funny.
And yeah, he does.
Sorry if I'm eating on Mike. I'm starving and pizza appeared next to me. So
Oh my God, that sounds like
I'll do my best to
dream.
not chomp. But yeah, I love him. He's got this bit where her, like the daughter's friend, Paige or something. I don't remember the daughter's friend name.
Riley. Mhm.
But she's like listening to music in class and she's moving and he like grabs her phone, right? He's like, you can have it back at the end of the day. And then you see the daughter and she like looks down at her phone and it's a text from her friend and it's like, you can bring yours up front too. And she looks up and he just mouths like, I know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he doesn't,
Or something like that. Maybe that's not what he mouths.
but it's a nice little exchange, and he really kind of has that high school teacher vibe, and he does talk about that concept of things being made to be sold with the intention of either becoming obsolete or breaking down, which is a really nice metaphor for just people getting older, that we think of ourselves when we're young as having almost like an eternal life. And then we get to you get to middle age or you get to be a senior citizen and you start to kind of feel like, wow, I had all these hopes and dreams and now I'm just kind of disposable. So it's a really nice, very clear cut, very fitting metaphor. So I enjoyed that bit, like that level of social commentary that I enjoy.
Yeah.
That's a nice metaphor.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's all it was a good metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't. You're right. They don't. It's not heavy handed and he's enjoyable to watch.
Right.
And now he starts getting calls of like, oh, hey, Mike Webster, you got to go down to the office. Your parents are here for something, and then he hangs up and then there's another call. Also, we've had, because, this is one of those things are trickling in or things that we see. And like I keep calling her the daughter and I didn't write down her name like an idiot.
Carly.
Thank you. So Carly's got a boyfriend that Nick Cage does not approve of, not because he's black, but because he's a junior and she's a sophomore. I don't know if that was intentionally like, because she's like, oh, I know exactly why you don't like him. I'm like, yeah, because he's a junior. And I'm like, okay. Feel the subtext is there because he is black. But like he's taking his PSATs and he like gets done and goes up and the administrator is or whatever the test watcher is called is like why are all the parents here so early? And all the parents are just standing outside the door waiting. Like it hasn't become this rabid. I like how it's now just immediately like insanity. Right. Or almost like we can wait for a second as long as I see my prey. I'm not going to tip my hand too hard yet, but right. And it's one of those effective where you don't see it, where he then leaves the PSATs and you see all the parents and then, the camera kind of follows him to his bike or whatever. And when it gets back to where you could see the doors again, there's no one there, implying they've all now gone inside.
Right.
To kill all the kids in there. Yeah. The most shocking one, which wakes us up, is I think done really well because there's something that I really loved about this movie. Some of the funniest bits in this movie are purely editing. The editing in this movie is hilarious. Just like the setup of a certain line into a flashback or one action into another. And our first one is the kid. So the son, who is like 9 years old, because the dad makes a comment about not making it to 10, like not a guarantee you're going to make it to 10.
Right.
But he's like at home in his PJs on a school day. A lot of weird dynamics I wasn't quite sure on. They also have a housekeeper who is there early in the morning to do whatever. You wouldn't expect a housekeeper to be there that early unless she lived there. Right. Because it's kind of while everyone's getting ready for the day. And she has a daughter there who's not going to school, who is she's maybe a little older than the son, which I didn't write his name. Oh, Josh. That's right. But Josh kind of has this flashback about this, like, he found like an injured bird and tried to nurse it back to health in his dad's car, and the dad finds it and he's like, oh, it smells like death in here. And like, as he says that, all of a sudden he's like snapped out of his daydream by, in the background, because before he snaps into the daydream, the housekeeper is tenderizing meat. And she does kind of have a blank look on her face while the daughter's doing dishes. So he's then snapped out as you just hear this meat tenderizer bludgeoning the housekeeper's daughter. And the kid is in panic. And then we like cut to a new scene.
Yeah, very, very well executed. And a really nice use of weaponry and arsenals in this movie. Like the
You don't
choices.
see a lot of good meat tenderizer deaths.
No, you
at all.
don't. And a meat tenderizer is a great weapon because it's weighted and it's got like the little spikes on the end. So that could do some
I
serious.
accidentally hit my brother in the face with a wood meat tenderizer once. Like, I like took a swing just to intimidate him, and the fucking head of it flew off.
Oh
And
no.
hit him in the face. It's not, and he like lost it. Like, I think he was more shocked than anything, but I got the fuck out of that situation as fast as I could. It was like the last worst thing I did to my brother. Came to an agreement after that. No more torture.
You finish on a high note though. Like meat
Yeah.
tenderizer to the face.
I mean, I like hit it to where like his glasses just like fucking like hit the ceiling. They flew off his face so hard. Like it was, and it was like that, like there was a pause of silence and then just this blood curdling scream. It was
Man,
awful. It was
I mean,
awful.
Meanwhile, like flash
I
forward
know
to the
he's
future,
listening.
and
He's
you're
probably
like,
listening to this right now. Like he's crashed his car, reliving this nightmare.
right. How lucky. I mean, you know what though?
Oh.
It's so much better that it was a wood meat tenderizer.
Oh, yeah.
At metal, that it's almost, like I've said before in other situations, it's almost worth it happening because it could have been so bad, but then it was good.
In retrospect, it was a real serendipitous moment.
He should be thanking you. But yeah, it's a nice use of a meat tenderizer and a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about with these kills, because you see this meat tenderizer and you know that this thing is going places in life. I mean, it's when you see this thing used early on and often in the movie, you're like, somebody is going to get it with that meat tenderizer. And so you're just waiting. You're waiting to see
Chekhov's meat
something.
tenderizer.
What's that?
Chekhov's meat tenderizer.
Yeah, right. So you're just waiting to see something that you don't even really want to see. Nobody wants to see this sweet young girl get her head bashed in with this meat tenderizer. And the director knows that, and he doesn't do that.
Mm-mm.
But you hear it, like you said, and it's the sounds of it that you know exactly what's happening.
Yep.
But it's
And you never see her body ever.
no. And so that's a really great use of that editing and the sound work and whatnot to imply the brutality of these kills without ever actually having to show them. But yeah, it's an awesome one. But I thought you were going to talk about, I mean, there's just so many awesome kills in this. You can pick any of them. But that one scene, now this is where this one kind of got me, because if you're a 15-year-old and you're like on the run from your homicidal parents or whatever,
Yeah.
at least you feel like you're a little bit able-bodied. You have a semi-adult body. But it's when the one parent in the beginning is like, because you've got all these parents lined up at the school gates, and they're just like trying to lure their children over to them
Mhm.
so they can kill them. And one of the kids looks really small. Like, I mean, it looks like they're maybe 10 years old or 11 years old or something. And you really feel for this poor kid because they're so young that they're not, they're easily swayed.
Yeah.
And
And
so
you're going
that-
to trust your parents.
Right. And the kid goes over and they get yanked over the top and then jabbed, absolutely just fucking puncture wound with the key on the
Yeah.
key.
The
Like,
key, that's right. Oh my
yeah, because you're like, how are they going to kill this kid? And then you just see, and you don't even really see where the key is going in, but you're assuming it's maybe the neck from
Yeah.
the amount of blood.
You
And
just
you're
see it
like,
come up
Yeah.
with the blood trail coming
Right.
out of it.
Oh, it's so gnarly and awesome. But
I
yeah,
forgot
so
about the key. Because, you got a dad, like, you see someone and you're like, oh, they knocked over that garbage can. But no, he's like using the bag. Then he catches his kid and just fucking suffocates him right there on the football field.
Yeah, that one was, yeah, you see, yeah, when he's whipping the bag out, or emptying it out so he can, like, man, it's so funny. Like, it doesn't sound like it should be funny stuff, but it's hilariously well done.
Yeah. So, and our couple kid characters, one of them gets away. The boyfriend, he gets away. He goes to his house. Thankfully, his dad is drunk. I think that helped him. Yeah. Evade his dad, and then his dad falls on the bottle that he's broken in order to kill the kid. That's a wicked kill. You know that kid's getting out of that situation anyway. So it wasn't. He's got to go and help the girlfriend.
Right. And I was just gonna say. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, but her friend Riley meets and it's nothing. They just kind of go to Riley's. They leave school to get away from the insanity. Riley's like, my mom's not home. And they get there and they're like, that's when they're like, want to have a fucking drink? And they're like smoking pot in the kitchen. And that's when she sees like the margarita mix and stuff out. And it's such a great part where Riley then goes upstairs to find her mom. And she's just sitting in her bedroom and holding this picture of, I guess, her and her husband. But like I got then like the husband's not around or something.
Yeah.
And, she's just like, Mom, are you all right? And it looks like she's been crying. And she's just like, I spilled my drink. And then the next time you see them is she's just choking out the daughter, like with a belt, like just has it like fully torqued around her neck. And that's when when Carly walks in, she's like, oh, hey, Carly. Which is great. Cause then you like, they establish the rules so well without just fucking dumbing it down and spelling it out. Like no one goes, I mean, I guess there is a part where the boyfriend's like, they don't want you, like they just want their own kids, but you've already figured that out. The audience has already figured that out.
Yeah. And that's what another thing that they do that I think is a really neat idea is that as opposed to it just being like widespread, like all the adults have gone crazy and they're going to kill anybody that they can get their hands on. One of the interesting things that I kind of enjoyed was that somehow the police didn't seem to be affected by this, or at least the police. I mean, I'm sure that if the police saw the static, they probably went after their own kids, but there are some policemen that don't get affected by that. So they're really trying to hold off these parents because you're so used to these movies being like, if the adults are bad, then all the adults are bad.
Right.
But we just see these horrible parents and the police like, don't fucking kill your kids, like genuinely trying to stop them, from doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right.
They're not successful.
No. So there are some nice rules established there. I do really like the actor that plays the boyfriend. I don't know if
Damon.
I got his Damon. Yeah. And I couldn't find anything else on him.
Yeah. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. So,
right. Yeah.
Stop talking about him then.
Fuck that guy. But no, he does a great job. Great performances all throughout. The girl that plays Carly, I really liked her look. She doesn't, as the actress doesn't normally look the way that she does in this movie when I was looking up her other stuff. In this movie, she to me looks like a young Madonna, like a really, really young teenage Madonna. She's got really nice look to her face. The younger brother, a lot of times when you're casting roles of kids at that sort of younger in between age, they usually come off as annoying more than anything. They're too old to be little kids and be cute, and they're too young to be cool teenagers, so they end up being fucking annoying. But this kid is really good. He seems really sincere when he's scared, he hits all the right notes. But a lot of people, when they talk about the performances in this movie, aside from Nicolas Cage, Selma Blair does an awesome job in this.
Selma Blair is so good in this. And it's crazy. She didn't do anything for like 6 years because she went, ironically, focus on her kids. And then her first thing back after like 6 years of only kid stuff is some cathartic release.
Yeah. Oh, you mean I get to try and kill my kids for the whole movie?
Yeah.
Fuck yes.
No, it's okay, honey. I'm just playing a bad person in a movie.
Yeah. Mommy's working for scale.
Yeah.
Just
Mom,
for
I hate to
it.
say it, but this is some of your best work.
Right. Yeah,
Which it is like she runs so many more emotions than not that I was surprised that she could, but just I guess it's more of a testament to the writing of scenes that she was going to have. Because she's got the scene with her sister and the baby. And there's a short scene after that where they're like, you have to give us that baby. Like she is so already protective of the baby. Like there's a very natural feeling there. There's a scene earlier where she's trying to get a career back, like go back to work. And she goes back to her former employer, and who at some point was like, whenever you need a job, come back here, and she's like, I'm here for that. And then it's very implied like, well, that was when you were younger and hotter. Like that doesn't like, I know you said you think forever meets forever. I meant like 2 years,
Right. And she is so perfect in that scene.
Yeah. And that's another great editing where she just is kind of laughing it off and then like cut to her car and she's just screaming, crying like.
Yeah. But she has that, like, as we get older, I don't know. I think in some ways this movie might be even more enjoyed by somebody who is middle-aged. I mean, I'd probably still love this movie if I was watching it as a teenager, but to have seen that kind of desperation in real life, when she's in that office and she's doing a really sweet job of trying to be funny and trying to be cool and she just really wants the job, but she's trying to make things loose and trying to make herself attractive, not in a like a trying to lead him on sort of way, but she's just trying to be like somebody that you would want to hire. She's trying to establish a connection, some chemistry.
I think it's kind of implied they had a past too.
Yeah, I felt that a little bit. Yeah, I did. And the thing is, it's like she just handles that balance of, I'm going to be super fun, I'm going to be real quick with my comebacks, I'm going to be hip and cool, but all like underneath a layer of desperation. And it's so well done. And you're right. The thing is, we think of Selma Blair. What do you think of? You think of like a goody two shoes, prudish kind of person. That's usually what Selma Blair does. And so to see her in this movie,
I always think of her from like darker stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I think of her from like Legally Blonde. Or like Cruel Intentions. Yeah. She's so great. She hits all the right notes. And then we have, of course we have to talk about our boy, Nicolas Cage. And he does a nice balance too. And part of this is probably in how they directed the scene and how it was edited, but they do a really kind of cheeky job of, before he even gets the virus or the hysteria or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. There's something sort of, he loves his kids, and that he does, but they paint him in you could see him as being menacing. They have this scene where he's going to tickle his son and they kind of amp it up as if he's going after him, which this movie does some really nice fake scares. Also when Riley is testing out to see how recently the drink was made in the blender, you see her reach her hand into the blender.
Yeah, you're just waiting for it to be turned on. Yeah.
You're just on the edge of your seat, just fucking crossing your fingers. Please God, don't let this happen. But yeah, so they do a lot of real near scares, we'll call them. And so they do a nice job of saying that Nicolas Cage does love his family. He's not a weirdo, but there's something there. There's something going on with him. And of course, that's explored in great depth in a great scene later on when he has purchased, unbeknownst to anybody else, purchased a pool table to have in the basement so that he can kind of like start this little man cave and have a space for himself that he feels like he needs, because this is where the movie comes right out and says it when Nicolas Cage breaks, he's just finished meticulously building this pool table, making it perfect and level and everything. Yeah. And then
leveling a pool table is the most difficult thing. We had one when I was in high school, and I remember that being such an ordeal of leveling the pool table correctly.
Yeah. And the director even talks about it, because what happens is Selma Blair's character comes downstairs. They have a little bit of an argument. Nicolas Cage is already, processing and struggling with some things in his life in general, his midlife crisis. And so he's like, well, then fine, fuck you then. And then he destroys the pool table. And what's funny is the director said it's very, very hard to build a pool table. And it's even harder to bust one up. But they really did. They really built it to spec then broke it. And it took forever. And they said Nicolas Cage was exhausted at the end of that scene. And he's doing a lot of improv that when he's doing the hokey pokey thing.
Did you see he got a music credit for that?
Oh, no. You know what happened?
They give it a writing credit and sung by Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. They and that shocked him. Everybody, he throws that improv in there as he's like busting up the table. And, it's kind of classic Nicolas Cage. And singing the hokey pokey, and it's funny. And then they all thought like, oh my God, that song's been around forever. It's got to be public domain. It's not. Wow. So then they had to buy the rights, which thankfully they were able to do. Otherwise they wouldn't have been able to use it. But really great scene.
Time to build another pool table.
Right. Exactly. So they have a really nice scene there. And this, as much as Cage is doing a really great job in that scene of projecting what it is that this movie is about, that these parents are struggling with the fact that the person that they thought they were going to be never actually happened, and they don't even recognize themselves anymore. It's really, again, Selma Blair that really makes that scene, because you expect her to continue to be pissed off at him, but instead she shows compassion, and it's very.
Like, I feel the same way.
Yeah, very sincere, very nice shared moment between the two of them, and it's a really nice setup to them getting the hysteria together, which is another juxtaposition, because here they are, two people that aren't really connecting that much anymore. And then they get this virus where they want to kill their kids, and it's what brings them together.
Yeah. And I do love that moment because she doesn't get it until like right before she gets back home. Like I noticed that's when her static comes. He's gotten it at work already.
Yeah.
And he comes home. He's kind of already had a tussle with the kids, and they've like hid themselves in the basement. So she comes in, right, finds him laid out on the floor. And I just love this scene where she kind of like helps him back up, and they're both kind of like, you're home early. She's like, yeah, you too. And they kind of share this longing look of like, are you here why I'm here? And then he's with nothing spoken, and then he's just like, kids are in the basement. They're both like ready to fucking bust down with the saws all.
Yeah, that's so good. And so funny and so hilariously, repeated again by Nick Cage with the saws.
Yep.
Like, he's so good. He's got a lot of fun delivery in this. Like there's even that scene at the end where they're tied up, and Nicolas Cage at this point, kind of jumping ahead, is on death's door. He's been stabbed. He's been blown up. He's just probably 20 minutes away from dying if he doesn't get help. And the parents are both tied up down in the basement. The kids are watching them at a safe distance. And they're trying to their parents are still under the effects of the hysteria, but the parents know that they can't really get out, that the kids really have them tied up good. And the kids are still trying to speak to their parents in a loving way and say I love you. And the son, Josh, says hey, Dad. And the line that Nicolas Cage says is buddy, acknowledging him. And most people playing that role, if they know that they've been stabbed and blown up and all this stuff, probably would do some sort of a buddy, just like near death. But Nicolas Cage, being who he is, just goes, buddy. like you haven't seen this guy in 20 years. Like I'm sorry I've been trying to kill you for the last 24 hours, but buddy, it's so great. And it's just one little word, but it's just done in such a great way. And that's what's so awesome about him that we haven't really touched on in all of our discussion about Nick Cage so far, is that he is super funny.
Yeah. How about his, there's one shot, I died laughing at this, where it's right when he gets home the first time. And so Carly's boyfriend is trying to protect her.
Yeah.
And he rustles him down to the ground. And there's kind of this great shot where he like pulls back to punch him, and it's kind of over his shoulder, but he like looks up and does this like deep inhale, like and then just like punches him. But it's just this nice, relaxed, like inhale before he just smashes his kid's head.
Yeah, and that exchange when he's chasing the boyfriend around the island in the kitchen, like talking about how, you know, the kid's trying to say, I'm not here for what you think. I'm not here for what you think, like basically to get with your daughter. And he's like, you know, no, I know how you kids are and in the world that you're raised in now and everything that you see on the internet, dildo to mouth, ass to mouth. He's like listing off all of these like sexual categories.
Yeah, every Pornhub categories come across.
So great. So funny.
There is a scene we didn't talk about, because I mean that's essentially the movie,
right?
But there is the part, because we've mentioned earlier, I think I said it during the summary, but they also say earlier in the film, like, hey, don't forget your parents are coming over for dinner tonight. So there's a point where you're like, oh right, Nicolas Cage's parents, obviously probably his parents, are under the I didn't even think about that next step. So, you know, when the doorbell rings and it's them, you're like, oh, Nicolas Cage is fucked. And yes, as soon as he opens the door, his dad just stabs him in the stomach, but not to kill him. So here was a part where everything that I've been enjoying, because it's felt consistent, this felt a little inconsistent, because the dad doesn't really try and kill Nicolas Cage, or he does, but then he's like, I miss your gut. Like he did it on purpose, you know, like he's just mutilating him. Then the mom fights with the grandma. And I'm like, well, the grandma wouldn't want to fight her. Like, you know, she wouldn't be after her. You know what I mean?
I see what you mean. I see how it could go that way. I think the gut thing was more, I don't think he was saying it on purpose. I think he's just saying like, don't be such a pussy. I didn't get you where I really wanted to.
Oh, okay.
But
that's better. Because he still does try to attack him, but I felt like there wasn't the urgency that we've seen throughout the movie from the grandparents, I guess. And but then the grandma fighting Selma Blair, I was just like, I don't know.
I think that's, you know what's funny about that. And I'm not trying to excuse it for the movie, but I think it's kind of funny that there is this sort of mystical, weird, unexplained hysteria that's driving the parents to want to kill their kids. But at the same time, like the fact that they do have the mother-in-law go after the daughter-in-law, that's saying that, hey, we don't need a hysteria for this to happen because no mother-in-law likes their daughter-in-law. No, I shouldn't say that. There is some that have good relationships.
If they had framed it as, I mean, it's one thing, you know, to want to kill your kids, but the grandparents would still want to be protective of the grandchildren. So they're fighting with the parents to stop them from killing their grandchildren, you know, but maybe we're getting into too complex and we really didn't, they don't need it.
It could, right. When you're watching the movie,
minor idea and complaint,
but what
because they meet the best deaths.
Yeah, and what rules is that the grandpa is played by none other than Lance Henriksen, who is exactly the sort of grizzled old badass that you would want to be grandpa.
Because they mentioned earlier, like grandpa's going to bore us with his nom stories, and yes, I could see Lance Henriksen boring me with nom stories. I love and here's another great humor moment where it almost seems out of place, but it's not. But it's so goofy, you're just like, what? To where, so they're the Nicolas Cage and Lance Henriksen are fighting in his car, and they throw it into reverse. Meanwhile, Selma Blair and the grandma are fighting outside. The grandma kind of gets in the way of the car as it's coming out. It hits her, and she like goes over the top of the sunroof, but it's in slow-mo, and even the music goes slower. And she's just got this goofy face as she slides face first over this glass as Nicolas Cage is looking up at her. Like just moments like that. The other, like the like my favorite editing bit was Nicolas Cage is going to get something and he hears a gunshot and he, you know, runs back downstairs and Selma Blair's been shot, because it's like, and she's like, what the fuck? The kids have a gun? you have a gun. Like another part of his midlife crisis is he went out and bought a gun, and he's like, it was in a case, right? And she's like, what was the combination? And he's like, Josh's birthday. And like you immediately cut to like Josh and his tidy whities popping this fucking gun case open. Oh God.
Yeah,
So good.
so good.
So good.
And in the midst of all of this action and hilarity, one thing that they also do super, super good, and so many movies don't, is, and I don't know quite how to frame this as a phrase, but the concept of somebody being presumably dead but coming back. And a lot of times in movies, that's like, when someone does come back, you're like, oh, really? Like there they are again to save the day, or they come back too many times, or it just seems implausible that but in this movie, the poor boyfriend,
Oh man.
it has at least 2 times that you think that he is an absolute goner. But when he comes back to save the day, or there's even a scene where grandma comes in to save the kids at one point, again, after you think that she's been killed. It's really, really great. They don't
You're
have
almost like, oh, thank God he's not dead. Not, come on. This guy is dead.
Yeah. And
It's
usually
just enough. It's not like he's like, he wasn't like impaled on a, post and got off of it. He just kind of like fell down the stairs.
but really bad.
Really bad. Like he also had like a coat hanger stuck through his cheek.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's had some injuries, but
Right.
not enough to where you'd be like, there's no way he can still be going.
Oh, and by the way, Nicolas Cage, if you are your character, if you have a problem with this boyfriend, you are so off the mark, because this kid would do anything for your daughter.
Yeah.
You get a fucking unwound coat hanger through your cheek, and you just don't go running out the door to anywhere but there. If you're not doing that, then you really love that girl.
That's an awkward Christmas every year.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I love. Now, of course, you read interviews about this movie, and because everybody loves this movie, it got really great reviews. So everybody's like, is there going to be a part 2? And Nicolas Cage is already like, I'd be thrilled to do a second one. So I don't know. I mean, they came up with so many great things for this movie. Part of me would be interested to see what else they could come up with.
Yeah.
But I also love the fact that they just end it so perfectly. There's really no resolution.
No,
yet.
there's no.
And
Because Nicholas, like you said earlier, like the kids are like, we love you. And there is this moment of like, the kids and parents are kind of on the same level. Like the kids are like, you drive us nuts sometimes, it's everything a parent could say to a kid. The kids are saying to the parents. And there is a moment like where you're like, oh, all right, well, I guess everything's okay. And Nicolas Cage is like, but just sometimes we just wanna, and then it cuts. Like, he's going to say like, kill you.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where it cuts. You're like, nope, I guess they're still crazy. I don't know what they're going to do now.
Right. Yeah. No, it's no real resolution, but you don't need it because the movie it's just an experience movie. It's a fun viewing experience film. And I love that about it. Like I've said all along this episode, it doesn't overcomplicate itself. It just does what it intends to do, which is to entertain you and make it fun and edgy enough to up the stakes. And I can't imagine anybody that wouldn't like this movie. If you like horror in general, so much fun. Highly recommend. I'm so glad. I had completely forgotten about this because Nicolas Cage has been on this sort of weird tear of doing these independent or low budget horror movies. So they just seem to come out like once or twice a year now. And this one I had completely forgotten about until, you had mentioned it in the list of possible things we could do. And I was so thrilled because I wanted to see it, and it's worth the wait. It's fantastic.
Yeah. When I thought of doing the Cage movies, I was like, well, what else could we do? And that was like one of the immediate ones where it's like, because I'd kind of forgotten about it. And I was like, yes, this will give me a perfect reason to watch that movie. And I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
It's so good. I highly recommend it. Okay. Well, that's it. That's Mom and Dad from 2017. Join us next week as Horror Through the Cages continues. This one is very recent. This is from 2019, the year they used to make movies. It's called Color Out of Space. It's a H.P. Lovecraft story.
Very excited.
A rippy.
Another one I haven't seen, another one that I desperately wanted to see. I'm super, super stoked about that.
Yeah. This looks like one of those hallucinogenic horror movies.
Yeah.
Where it just looks like I've only seen the trailer for it, and the use of color in it looks really cool. I'm excited about the style and the vision of it. But I don't know what else to expect. I know nothing else about it.
Yeah, Lovecraft is if you're watching anything Lovecraftian, you know it's gonna probably do with not just like a singular killer like a Jason or a Freddy or something, but it's gonna be some like creature or another race or some and Earth is under attack and all of civilization could be lost. I mean, the guy thought big, like it's not like small little stories. I mean, he does these fantastical creature feature, giant monster. Earth is the entire planet Earth is in trouble. So it should be super epic. It should, I mean, like in a literal sense, like an epic movie. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait. Cool. There's that. And then our super secret final episode.
Woohoo!
Don't tell anyone.
Oh, I can't. That's
what could it be?
One of my most
They did The Rock.
favorite. What am I? Yeah.
I'd be willing to do The Rock. If you consider that movie horror in any way, I would love to rewatch and talk about The Rock.
I've never seen that movie.
Oh my God, Tim.
I just
it's
did
so
just that,
good.
Just that final scene where like they're both like standing up and kind of huffing and puffing or something like that. And the camera's doing that really like shitty late 90s like swirl and like, yeah.
It just looks a scene like that. It's not at the end. Oh, Tim. No. Listen. Sean Connery, so good. Nicolas Cage, so good. Like this is peak Cage, but like tempered Cage, like where he's actually like playing a character, but there's so much Cage insanity in it. But it's not just like, Tim, I love this movie. The Rock.
I thought you were joking.
No, The Rock is amazing.
I'll
it's not a horror movie, but you should watch it. We won't cover it on this show, but
okay.
Yes, is it a mindless Michael Bay action movie? Absolutely. But just Ed Harris is great in it. Sean Connery and Nicolas. Who would have thought Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery would have made such a great duo?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll check that out for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, all right. So please watch The Rock. Please follow us on Instagram at Slumber Podcast Massacre. Send us an email, slumberpodcast@gmail.com. Our Patreon is patreon.com/Slumber Podcast Massacre. Thanks to our patrons. You help make this show possible. Join us next week as Horror Through the Cages continues. We talk about the Color Out of Space from 2019. Tim, do you have anything left to say about Mom and Dad?
Well, I mean, there's so many wonderful things. Obviously, anybody that listens to this will know. Just, I mean, there's no way for us to even catch all of it. So really, you should watch it for yourself. But one thing I will say about it, it might be the only movie that I've seen where someone insults somebody by calling them a filthy dinosaur. Which was
I don't remember that.
And the funny thing is that it's when Nicolas Cage is wrestling with Lance Henriksen and they're in the car and you think that he's going to call him like a typical like motherfucker or whatever, but he just goes, "You filthy dinosaur."
Man.
And then the retort is Lance Henriksen says, "Fucking dinosaur," like as a question. So I don't know if the line was fucking dinosaur or filthy dinosaur, but they're both great.
Oh shit. I just thought of one last thing I wanted to also point out that I forgot to point out. And it was just a part where I was like, just accurately summed up how I felt like it just painted how like what the parents were going through. Cause it's like the news interviewing one guy about the death of his kid, and just being like, yeah, like it was awful and it was horrible and it was a horrible thing. And then there's a pause and it was like, it was exactly right.
Yeah.
It's so good. Okay.
No, I love that.
All right, Tim. We will see you next time as Horror Through the Cages continues. Woohoo! Cage Rage! All right, Tim. We'll see you later.